All right, all right, all right. Hey, everybody. So I'm so excited because finally figured out how to use this StreamYard effectively and efficiently. So I am on Facebook and I'm on YouTube as well. So if you prefer the YouTube platform, I did leave the link in the comments and you can view the live via Facebook or YouTube. So today is May 30th, 2022. And as usual, I am back to doing book discussions on the last Monday of the month. And this month, we are discussing Africana Womanism by Dr. Clenora Hudson Wings. And I'm so excited about the book discussion. Greetings, Brother T. Hope all is well with you. Enjoyed our book discussion earlier today on Booker T. Washington, The Making of a Pan-Africanism by Dr. Tereen Wright. So this is my second talk. And today I'm going to be talking a little bit about African womanism. I'm not going to go through the whole book, but are some key points that I want to go over in the book. And I want to talk about the relevancy of this book and her particular research into what it is to be an African womanist. But let me go back. I am at the Culture Center. I am in Coldwater, Mississippi, on the square, 436 Central Avenue. This is our Restoration New Direction Culture Center. This is where we hold most of our events. This is where Ashe Academy and Oasis Literacy Center are housed. We do have our Saturday school here on the weekends. And if you are interested in your children attending, please let me know. They are learning academics, they are learning their history, and they're also learning some soft skills, how to treat one another. They are building their confidence and awareness as well. So we are extremely proud of the work that we are doing out of the center. Um, as I said, today is May 30th, 2022, and today is Memorial Day. And if you haven't already, I would encourage you to view Dr. Oyamaat's interview. She had an excellent interview with an elder today, Mr. Nate Hutchison. And the title of their discussion was The Black Historical Origins of Memorial Day. And so they got into a lot of history, our story during the interview. It was spectacular. I haven't seen all of it. I caught like kind of toward the end, but from what I heard, this Baba is a library. You know, there's an African proverb that states when an old man dies, it's like losing a library, right? And so um I'm gonna go back and view it because he talked about the Gullah Geechee culture in South Carolina, and I was fascinated when he was like, "Well, you know, Gullah is a derivative of Angola," and he talked about the African West African connection there in South Carolina. So I would encourage you all to go and watch that interview that Dr. Maad did with Baba Nate Hutchison. And shout out to Dr. Maad for showing up and showing out at our Saturday school the past Saturday. She taught our scholars about the field of engineering. Saturday, we devoted that session to STEM, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. Dr. Maad is an professor of engineering at Morgan State University. So not only did she teach our scholars about the field of engineering, they also they got to participate in an activity as well as civil engineers. They built bridges with some dots, candy, and toothpicks. So they were thoroughly engaged. So I want to thank Dr. Myatt, and I want to thank Brother Akil Parker for coming through with a great systematic lesson. Now, systematics is where he combines history and mathematics, and his focus was on uh, Baba Medgar Evers, and he explained to us, you know, Memorial Day is about our ancestors people who lost their lives in service to the country, and if you think about it that way, Baba Medgar Evers was in service to the country and specifically to us, his people. So Medgar Evers was honored with an entire systematic lesson, and even the adults were engaged because it was full of information, and the math component was he explained that Medgar Evers and his brother had to walk 6 miles to and from school every day. And if they had a 150-day school year, how many miles would they have walked during the year? So that was really, really interesting and really, really insightful. So I want to thank them again for helping out with our scholars on Saturday. So, as I said, today I'm going to be discussing a little bit about Africana Womanism. And this book was first published in 1993. So, next year it'll be what, 30 years that this book was written. And this is the fifth edition. And how I came across Dr. Clenora Weems was Brother Patrick sent a video to my inbox of an interview that Push Black had done with her. And she was talking about this concept of African womanism. She said it's not feminism because feminism does not work for Black women. And she got started talking about it's something that we've already been doing. In fact, they have taken a page out of our womanism and model feminism after some of the concepts. And so now Black feminists are copying the copy. And so I was so intrigued by that I said, I got to get that book. I got to find out more about this ideology. And I did. And I started reading the book. And I was reading the information about her because she is still teaching. She is at, I want to say, the University of Missouri. I think she's in Columbia. I'm not sure. But anyway, I looked her up on the internet and you can find her information through the university in where she teaches. And so I sent her an email. And I was like, this is what we're doing in Mississippi with the Black Liberation Movement. I just started your book and I'm totally fascinated. I'm really enjoying it. Uh, I would love to talk to you. Uh, I would love to talk to you sometime. And left my information, left my cell number, left my email, all that. And I'm not kidding y'all, within 10 minutes, she called me. She called me and she was like, "Hey, I got your email." Because she's originally from Memphis. And I was like, we're in Coldwater, which is like 30 minutes south of Memphis, da da da. So she called me and we talked about her her ideology. I won't say concept because it is very important that we understand exactly what it is that she is expressing in African womanism. So anyway, we had this great conversation and I was like, well, can you come on Facebook and YouTube and sit down and talk to me about the book? And she was like, no, I don't really do Facebook. I don't do social media. But, if you want to get together with a group of people, we can maybe Zoom and have a conversation that way. So I'm still trying to work with her and figure out when the best time would be that she could come in and talk to us about her book because y'all, this book will have you engrossed from the beginning. But I'm not going to go through the entire book. I just want to bring out some key points. Like I said, the book has, like I said, this is the fifth edition. So the book has two forwards, one preface, and an introduction. And so uh the deal is there's so much in the introduction, the forward, and the preface. I have so much underlined, but I'm not going to um, read anything from the first forward. I will read from the second forward, written by James B. Stewart and uh, Emma Mazema, because it kind of introduces you to the book and what to expect while you're reading the book. Yeah, Brother T, this is my thing. Y'all, you and Dr. Ma know I love those books and love to read with you guys. So I'm excited about having both platforms going at the same time now, Facebook and YouTube. So going back to the book, and I'm in the forward to the fifth edition. Um, so James Stewart and Amos kind of lay a groundwork for what the book is going to be about. They say, right, it is important to recognize that African womanism does not ask Black women to ignore or subordinate their legitimate concerns regarding maltreatment and restricted opportunities. Put my glasses on. To illustrate, Hudson Wings reminds the reader it has been apparent from the beginning that African women in particular have been and must continue to be concerned with prioritizing the obstacles in this society, the lack of equal access to career opportunities, fair treatment of their children, and equal employment for their male counterparts. In addition, she maintains that the African woman is above all demands respect for and recognition of herself in order to acquire true self esteem and self worth, which in turn enables her, among other things, to have complete and positive relationships with all people. So, and they go on to state that this is the God given birthright as a people freedom, security, and happiness. And I wholeheartedly agree with that. So we move forward to the preface from the first edition, and of course, this was written by Dr. Weems herself, and she explains from the get-go that it is the unique experience of African women within a feminist framework, therefore redefining a new paradigm for African women and as an African women's movement. So she talks about why is it that Black women identify with the feminist movement, and she states that African women's assimilation of feminist rhetoric and philosophy. And so we had to move beyond that and start naming for ourselves and doing for ourselves, which I'll discuss even further because there are 18 tenements of African womanism, and self-defining is one of them. Okay. So in the introduction, as I said, there are two forwards, a preface, and an introduction. This one is written by Daphne Williams Natiri, and I hope I'm not butchering her last name, Natiri, Ntiri. She states the majority of African women on public platforms have rejected feminism for a multiplicity of reasons. First, there is the unquestionable need to reclaim African women. Second, they are perplexed over the racist origins of the feminist movement. Third, they have found little solace in the doctrines and mission of the feminist movement. And fourth, the reality, struggles, and expectations of the two groups remain on different planes. So, again, this book was written in 1993. And so, as we move forward, we're seeing the awakening of Black women joining this feminist movement. And so, I love what uh, Dr. Maat and Baba Nate spoke about earlier was that a lot of times we don't give anything historical context, that we look through the lens of what's happening now as though or we look through the lens of what happened then in the now context, and so we don't understand the historical significance of what has happened already, and so we just start speaking and acting in ignorance, right? And so I think and know that is happening now with this great divide that's going on between Black men and Black women. Okay. Um, I love this part because she references Lerone Bennett Jr. And so, me being a part-time historian, I know that Lerone Bennett Jr. was born and raised in Clarksdale, Mississippi, which is about an hour from where I am now. And he would go on and write the great classic Before the Mayflower. But Lerone Bennett Jr., the activist and social critic, in his discourse on lost identity and Black consciousness, believes that the naming process is of extraordinary importance. How people have been classified and named in the social order in the past has a lot to do with the myriad distorted images created. Naming is too critical an act to be left in the hands of the dominant group at this phase of our history, he says. We have been named. We should now become namers. And so what she's referencing is that uh, when we talk about Black feminists, we're just taking their construct and adding Black to it. And that's not naming ourselves and that's not defining ourselves, which Dr. Amos Wilson talks about all the time. If you don't know who you are, you're whoever somebody says you are, right? So we need to practice Kujichagulia, self-determination, name for ourselves, act for ourselves, define for ourselves. Okay. So in the introduction, she goes on to explain how white feminism came about. And she references, I'm trying to find it, the uh the white women who were pushing suffrage. That was who? Caddy Staten and what was the other woman's name? Uh can't find it. Susan B. Anthony. Right. And so what happened was they were pushing white women suffrage, and in 1970, the 15th Amendment to the Constitution of the United States ratified the voting rights of African men, leaving women, white women in particular, and their desire for the same rights unaddressed. So middle class white women were naturally disappointed, and they assumed that their efforts towards securing full citizenship for African people will ultimately benefit them too in their desire for full citizenship as voting citizens. The result was a racist reaction to the amendment and Afrikaners in particular. Thus, from the 1880s and on, an organized movement among white women shifted the pendulum to a racially conservative posture on the part of white women in general. They asserted that the vote for women should be utilized chiefly by middle class white women who could aid their husbands in preserving the virtues of the republic from the threat of unqualified and biological inferiors, parentheses, African men, who, with the power of the vote, could gain a political foothold in the American system. And so that is basically how everything shifted because, they were angry. And I remember someone talking and speaking to that with Frederick Douglass, when he was speaking to, okay, so now that we're free, what do we do now? And they were like, hey, we ain't trying to help you get any further. You got your freedom, so now you're on your own, basically. And so we had to understand that um, they see us as black first and then as women. And she speaks to that in this book. She is like, before they even see my face, they see my race, right? And then when I enter the room, they see my sex. So yeah. Um, so these feminists would go on to say there is but one way to avert this danger, and that danger was, black people getting their foot in the political arena. The middle class white men must recognize the usefulness of women's suffrage as a counterbalance to the foreign vote and as a mean of legally preserving white supremacy in the South. And she's quoting from the book The Free and the Unfree by uh, historian Peter Carroll and David Noble, and they're quoting Carrie Chapman Cat. So she goes on to say, this is Dr. Weems. These suffragists felt that because African people, African men in particular, with their new status as voters were members of an inferior race, they should not be granted the right to vote before them, which did not come until much later with the August 1920 19th Amendment. And there was some time ago that I read and I understood that this is what happened. You know, these women, white women, were angry because black men were granted the right to vote before them, right? So feminism is a term conceptualized and adopted by white women, involves an agenda that was designed to meet the needs and demands of that particular group. For this reason, it is quite plausible for white women to identify with feminism and the feminist movement. Having said that, the fact remains that placing all women's history under white women's history, thereby giving the latter the definitive position, is problematic. And I agree. White feminists have done in reality, what white women feminists had done in reality was take the lifestyle and techniques of African women activists, this is what I said earlier, and use them as models or blueprints for the framework of their theory, and then name, define, and legitimize it as the only substantive movement for women. So what she's saying is they have taken parts of what we were doing as our African being and as African women, and they are using it to push forward this power for white women. And so when we come along and we talk about, well, I'm a black feminist, all we're doing is copying the copy of our original selves. We just have to be who we are. You know, Professor Small says all the time, we must remember what we already know. If we remember what we already know, we won't even have to subscribe to any of this these organizations or these ideologies, especially when they're not in our best interest, right? So I'm going to move on through the book because I just have so much underlined because there's so much information. I should take a note from Dr. Maad and Brother T and maybe just go through one chapter a week. But no, I was like, I don't want to be on that much, so I just try to kind of cover the key points um during within an hour because I really want to encourage and uh inspire you all to pick up this book and read it and study it for yourself so that we can become better. We can act upon the information that we are learning and do better, right? You learn better, you do better, and be better. That's my thing. Okay. So chapter 2 is titled Cultural Agenda Conflicts in Academia. And so this is when she speaks about when she first started realizing that black women needed something different. We needed something different than being a feminist, being a black feminist, being a womanist, and so on and so forth. And she distinguishes Africana womanism from all these different titles. And I really there was a passage in here where she wrote about why is Africana and why is womanism. And I really appreciated her speaking to the womanism part because she said anything could be a female. You can have a dog, an animal, a plant that could be a female, but only a human can be a woman. And I was like, yeah, that's spot on. And so I really appreciated that she even gets into in this chapter uh the the appropriation of Sojourner Truth, Ida B. Wells, and Harriet Tubman. Because if you follow any of the rhetoric, you or any of the propaganda, you will know that feminists try to claim our mamas as feminists. And we all know that they were fighting for black people when Harriet Tubman would return to the South, to the plantation. She wasn't just picking getting women, she was leading men, women, and children to freedom, right? She wasn't just coming and saying, okay, only the women can go with me because only the women need to be free. And of course, when you think about Mama Ida B. Wells, we have to understand you have to know that her whole uh research was based on the lynching of black men in the South. And so, they were specific to the race. And so we cannot let them uh change the legacy of our mamas. Also, Mama Sojourner Truth, and I have seen this myself, the hijacking of her "Ain't I a Woman" speech. Because when I first saw that, I was like, hey, hey, no, no, no. She's speaking to the fact that she's a woman just like the white woman is a woman, right? She's speaking to that. She's not speaking to not being treated uh fairly because she was a woman. She's speaking to the fact of being treated because or needing to be treated fairly because she was a black woman. And Dr. Wynne speaks to that because she lets us know that she had to get past the ridiculing of the white women saying racist things to her to even share her speech in the first place. And so that is a part that they leave out of history. And I got to reference um, Dr. Maud again because she had Dr. Tareen Wright on, and she was speaking to that. She was speaking to that we have to be the researchers of our history, and we have to um tell our stories instead of letting other people tell them. And that is, I'm learning that more and more as I really am serious in my studies so that we can move forward and do better, right? So I really want to get to the whole ideology of what the tenements of African womanism. And there are 18 distinct characteristics. And she lists them and then she goes into detail. So I want to go into detail about them as well. Um, so the first one is self-namer. So the African woman is a self-namer. And she quotes Malefic Asante. He says the generative and productive power of the spoken word. And so there is power in the ability to define. And that's classic Amos Wilson. But I'm getting ahead of myself because we're talking about self-namer, right? So in this, she speaks to we have to name ourselves. We can't allow other people to name us because we understand our experience better than anyone, right? And that's what I stress so much, especially when it comes to teaching our children. When we teach our children, we have to create our own standards. Forget everything you know about traditional education and think about what it is to learn as a Black person in this country. Think about scheduling. Our education may not be the standard 7:30 or 8 to 3. It may be in the evening. We have to create our own standards and name for ourselves, define for ourselves. That's just a basic principle of Kuji Chakalia. So that is the first characteristic of African womanism is a self-namer. So the African womanist, in realizing and properly assessing herself and her movement, properly names herself and her movement. This is a key step which many women of African descent have unfortunately failed to address for various reasons. Granted, while there are some who have taken the initiative to differentiate their struggle from the white woman's struggle, such as African feminists who differ from the African womanists in name only, they have yet to give their struggle its own name. And so we have to really think about that because when I read that, I was like, yeah, yeah. And as I said, there are so many underlines in this book that I kind of hate that I'm not going to get to go through everything. But like I said, I want to inspire you to pick up this book. Okay, so we have self-namer, and the next is self-definer. Definitions belong to the definer, not the defined. And that was taken from Toni Morrison's Beloved. And Toni Morrison is one of my favorites, if you don't already know. I think she was just raw and she just said what she said, and that was it. And I love one of my favorite quotes is because now we're going through this thing where, they're saying, well, if books can influence you to do this and this, da da da. No, Toni Morrison told us years ago that books are political. Books can change your mind. Books can have you doing things that or thinking things that you never even thought about. So everything is political, as Baba Mwalimu Rudy states. So anyway, Toni Morrison wrote in Beloved, definitions belong to the definer, not the defined. And so this is self-definer. And there's a passage that she shares from Nathan Hare, who's the chair of the nation's first Black Studies Department at San Francisco State University. He assisted in a 1993 issue of Black Issues of Higher Education that women who are calling themselves Black feminists need another word that describes what their concerns are. Black feminism is not a word that describes the plight of Black women. In fact, Black feminists have not even come together and come to a true core definition of what Black feminist is. The white race has a woman problem because women were oppressed. Black people have a man and women problem because Black men are as oppressed as their women. And that is something that we really, really need to understand. Because this whole thing about who's the most oppressed is really going to destroy us. There's an African proverb that says when two brothers fight to death, a stranger inherits their property. Now it says two brothers, but now we can say when two black people fight to death, a stranger inherits their property. In this case, I'm going to say our property is our children. When we're sitting up fighting each other, who's going to have access to our children? A stranger, or i.e., the enemy. So we really need to get it together and understand that neither one of us has it worse than the other, right? We are all oppressed. And um and part of the African womanism is understanding that, and understanding that we have a role to play in the liberation of all African people. The African womanist defines her own reality with no particular allegiance to existing ideas. Indeed, our cultural identity, our collective presence supersedes individualism. On a final note, must be noted that Black women too have the right to engage in intellectualizing issues relative, relative, to gender and how we interpret it without our being classified as feminists. Let it be known, as I reiterate, that the feminist has no exclusive on gender rights and gender issues. And so previously she had written that, you know, white women ideology of feminism, what they say is feminism is like the standard. And anything else, you know, just kind of fits into that. But she gives, as with the historical she gave on how, you know, white feminism evolved to where it is now. She states that a lot of these women that are in the white feminist movement don't want to address race because then it will expose them as being racist, because the feminist movement by with white women is not to buck the system but to control the system, right? They just want to be the ones to control the systems and control the who is doing what and how they're doing it. So it's not anything that they're not trying to destroy the system, they're just trying to control it. And so we have to be clear about that. So we have self-namer and we have self-definer. The third characteristic of African womanism is family centrality. A major cornerstone of African womanism is the centrality of the family. Unquestionably, the African womanist is more concerned with her entire family, including her male counterpart and children, our future generations, rather than just with herself and her sisters. Admittedly, the African womanist does not have the luxury of centering just herself as victim in a society where the victimization of her entire community is at stake. And so that is a key component of feminism. White feminism is that they have always been the victim and that they have never had a say. And of course, we all know that white men control, and there is patriarchy in this country, but it's not black control patriarchy. We have to be clear about that. It is white men controlling the system, right? Uh, and so I want to stop here because a lot of times we latch on to things without any historical context, any historical uh, reference, and we are saying, you know, yeah, women are suppressed. We have always been oppressed in this society, da da da. And I just want to sneak this book in. They were her property. The subtitle is White Women as Slave Owners in the American South. So uh don't don't drink all the Kool-Aid, because this book is excellent. And it gives the historical perspective of white women not always being a victim because they enslaved just as much as the men. And many times if they enslaved people, they had the law, you know, they had uh legal uh They owned them legally. They were like writing prenuptial agreements before it became a word because they wanted to maintain ownership of their property. So I just want to throw this in because a lot of times we don't even understand that white women, the historical significance of them and us and our experiences having differed, because even though they were considered second class to white men, they still had more power than any of us have ever had, any of our ancestors and elders ever had, because all they had to do was say a word and a black man could be lynched, right? So we got to get be clear about that. Okay, so I digress. Let me move back forward. So we have self-namer as a characteristic. We have self-definer as a characteristic. We have family centrality as a characteristic, and then we're on to in concert with males in struggle. And so African womenist African womanist, sorry, understands that we are in this together, and that if I come up, then I'm automatically gonna put bring my man up as well. And so, with so much going on with the current dominant society dictating what black men are and what they aren't, we somehow have bought into this notion that we don't have to do this for our men, that they need to find their own way, and that yada yada yada. I have heard these sentiments, but we have to understand that what she says, the last sentence, African men and women share a similar space as oppressed people, and therefore they cannot afford this division based solely on gender. And so, I tell everybody all the time that I give thanks for my childhood, my growing, my experiences, my life experiences, and this, witnessing uh, the men and the women in concert working together. Now with I guess social media is a blessing and a curse, and so we have to stop using it as a venting tool, and we had to stop drinking the Kool-Aid and getting lost in the sauce about our men, because we have to look at it from a historical perspective in which our men have been purposely excluded, and now there's a whole emasculation process, and we cannot continue to be instrumental in these war tactics against our men. Okay. So now that we are in the struggle together, we are also flexible role players. And I love this one because I was wondering where all this talk about gender roles was coming from. Gender roles. We don't have gender roles in our house. We don't da 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 in this house. And I'm like, what is the world is this coming from? But she explains that here. She speaks about the roles in the Africana community have always been virtually indistinguishable as Black women, unlike white women, have always not had the privilege of being homemakers exclusively. Africana men too have not had the consistent experience or the luxury of upholding the traditional role of the male as head of the household. In a traditional patriarchal system, the male is expected to fulfill the responsibilities outside the home, such as earning money while serving as the official head inside the home. And so when we talk about uh role players, she doesn't even use the phrase gender role. She says flexible role players. So mostly we do what we have to do, right? My dad was a great cook. We used to love his fried chicken, because if my mother was not feeling well or if she was busy doing something else, he would get in that kitchen and he would cook. He would wash clothes. My mom, she wasn't so much as a role player because she was just a nurturer by her very nature. But there were some things that she did that most that some times she shouldn't have had to do, but we did what we had to do, right? And so now um she says things, however, have changed. Today, the mainstream feminist dismantles, or better still, topsy turvies the traditional roles in general, thereby redefining the male and female roles in society as anything but traditional. Redefined sexual roles for feminists remains at the forefront of their movement. On the other hand, to some degree, the African womanist accepts the traditional roles, some of which are valid and appropriate, since obviously there are some distinctions between the sexes. Obviously, including on the base level, the biological difference between men and women. Since women clearly do not share that biological role as childbearer, and moreover, since men are still considered the protectors uh, in the most circles, therefore expected to uphold the family and defend both their women and children on any and all levels if need be. So there are just some roles that you cannot play. You know, we give birth, women give birth, right? And men are just hunters and protectors by nature. There are some things that just are by nature, but she explains that in the earlier part of the book how um feminists have they are repulsed by the idea of having to stay home and take care of children. They feel like there's so much more out there that they could be doing, not understanding as we do as Africans that being at home, taking care and nurturing and loving your family is one of the most precious gifts that we can have, and it's one of the most important roles that we can have as women. Right? I'm just gonna check one thing because I was wondering um why I can't see Africans that hold on. Being at my home, taking care and nurturing see comments on Facebook. I don't know what's going on. All I see is my comments on um YouTube, but that's okay. We're gonna keep it moving. So we have self-namer, self-definer, family centrality, in concert with men in the struggle, flexible role players, and now we're on to genuine sisterhood. And so this one, she doesn't write much about the next few. And genuine sisterhood is something that is that we've gotten away from in this individualistic dominant society we're in. Uh, but we do have some sister circles, but it's not the same because uh, when you are have a true form of sisterhood in a village or community, you have bonds. You know, I was talking to someone and we were talking about postpartum depression, and I was like, you know, I never experienced that. I never experienced, and I have three children, uh 27, 23, 20, and I never experienced postpartum depression. And I attribute it to having sisterhood, having a true sisterhood, and having women around me to help take care of my children, to give me wisdom, to guide me. You know, as a first time mother, I didn't know anything about taking care of a baby. I had never, you know, I have a cousin that we helped take care of when he was born, but I was young. So, you know, I didn't retain any of that. So when I had my first child, I was like, I don't know what I'm doing, you know, and thankfully I give thanks for my mother, my grandmother, and other women around me who provided that sense of this is what you need to do and kind of guided me through it as well as with my other two children. And so having that sisterhood, that motherhood, that um uh elderhood to help me and guide me, it was everything. And so when we get back to that, you know, a true sense of sisterhood, not a gossip circle, you know, we had to have some form of sisterhood to help us uh function, you know. Some people that women that we can trust with, you know, some intimate details of our lives because we had to vent, and we need someone who can understand. I'm really big on um elders, and she'll talk, and we're going to talk about that. as one of the characteristics. But having strong elders, we have to have them, and having strong sisters, we have to have them. And I'm thankful that I have both. Okay. So another characteristic of African womanism is strong. And so I have this thing about the strong black woman because I read this book, When Chicken Heads Come Home to Roost, and in it she was speaking to where the phrase of strong black women, where it originated from, and it was a term that was used in the antebellum South to describe black women and our ability to handle anything. Oh, take her children and sell them; they can handle it. Oh, rape her, we could handle anything. And so I hate that. I hate that description. But after I read this passage, it's about a paragraph of her describing what it is to be strong in the context of African womanism. I was like, okay, I can deal with that. So I'm just going to read a couple sentences. Writes, strength is very important for the survival of a people. And African womanism comes from a long tradition of both physical and psychological strength. She has endured centuries of struggling for herself and her family. The perfect example being how she survived during slavery, during which time she suffered the most unimaginably cruel and forced separation from her family. And so, you know, uh, you have to have strength. And I really like the word resilience in place of that. Okay. So let's go back and review. We have self-namer. We name ourselves. Self-definer. We define what it is that we need and how we need to do it. We are family central. We focus on our family and not just ourselves. We are in concert. We work in concert with our men in the struggle. We're flexible role players. We do what's necessary to make things work. We have genuine sisterhood because we know we need strength from one another. We know we need each other to help uh, create the nation that we want, and need. We're strong psychologically, mentally. We keep going. We're resilient. And now we're down to male compatibility. Okay. It is no question that the Africana womanist in general desires positive male female companionship, a relationship in which each individual is mutually supportive, which is an important part of a positive Africana family. Of course, this is not to rule out any other forms of positive relationships. That said, according to African writer Amadi, men and women need each other emotionally and of course for survival. So, you can't reproduce without a woman and a man. Although I know there's some mad scientists out there who are trying to change those things, we have to be use our natural mind and use what's logical and what is natural to reproduce and create and continue the uh, nation, right? Note that in the midst of the experiences of strong African women being abandoned by their men, there are millions of African women with entirely different experiences. Those who praise their hardworking husbands and father who get no recognition. These stories or cases have somewhat been overlooked in the historical perspective, but are now coming to the forefront. And that is my thing. It's like, stop using the minority to discredit the majority. You know, just because I have not had successful relationships or I'm not in a successful relationship now does not mean that all black men are not capable. I'm like, shoot, all of us know great black men, fathers, grandfathers, uncles, cousins, friends. Come on, we got to start praising and uplifting the great men. So maybe those scrubs that we are so discontented with will rise up and do better. And that's just what she's speaking to when makes that comment. We have to be compatible in order to, uh, make it as a collective. And so and she there's a table under this characteristic and 15 positive negative elements of male female relationships. So she's saying that the positive is love, the negative is contempt, the positive is friendship, the negative is rivalry, and so on and so forth. Again, please pick up this book, African Melanated Womanism by Dr. Clenora Hudson Weems. I'm not going to read through everything. I'm not. I'm just now going through the 18 characteristics of what it means, what African womanism is, and now we are on respected and recognized. And this is one of my favorites because this sentiment that I'm gonna do what I want to do and nobody can judge me and I'm living my best life and all these things, but then you're demanding respect. It doesn't work that way, right? And so she starts off with saying, before we can expect love and respect from others, we must first recognize the need and care for and respect our own ourselves. When this is done, the world will then understand that people will do whatever is necessary to maintain its earned stature in society. This demands for proper security and recognition. Further, the African womanist demands respect for and recognition of herself in order to acquire true self-esteem and self-worth, which enables her, among other things, to have complete and positive relationships with all people. And that is, one of the things that I talk about uh well, not constantly, but one of the things that I harp on is that I want to be a positive role model. And so with that comes respect. For you to be a positive role model, people have to respect you and they have to recognize you and they have to look up to you and say, hold on, I want to be like Miss Crystal, you know. So that is one of the things that I um really want us to think about as black women, right? Um, how do we gain respect and be recognized for that? So, yeah. So next, after being respected and recognized, the next characteristic is whole and authentic. Whole and authentic. And I think you know, a translation or a description can be transparent and honest. Transparent and honest. The true African woman seeks both wholeness, being complete, and authenticity, cultural connection in her life. Understandably, by now she wants it all, or at least as much as she can assist in achieving. That means she wants her home, her family, and her career, neglecting no one of these for the others. And that is something that, I talk about sometimes as African women. We have bought into this concept that one thing is more important than the other. And most times we think our career is more important than the nurturing and love of our family. And it really isn't, because we are raising up the next generation. And so we have to be mindful of that. And so, that's why the other characteristics, everything is like a continuum and you need all of them together. So, part of being whole and authentic is having a genuine sisterhood so that, if you're tired, hey, bring the children over here, I'll help you out. If you have that male compatibility, they'll you don't have these roles, everything just works together. And so and she explains that in the introduction in the early chapters of the book, how in African culture, you know, women just it was an honor to take care of the family, right? And you just made everything work because everybody kind of kind of flowed together, right? And so when you have this, you do this, um, or I don't like that you doing this, I don't like that you want me to do this, all the confusion. And we know what Nelly Fuller said about, if you don't understand and keeping us in a state of confusion, how it wreaks havoc on who we are, all these things work together. So after holding authentic, the next characteristic of African womanism is spirituality. And so you know, she speaks some from the Christian's perspective, but I think, as long as we know that there is a universe and there is a s- guiding force, we have to respect it, because in African um culture, everything works together. We work with nature, not against it. So we respect nature, we honor nature. We don't take advantage of it and try to alter it and try to dictate it and try to manipulate it in any way. We just know that everything works together. And so we're moving on to one of my favorites is being respectful of the elders. And she writes, the appreciation for our elders is a continuum of African culture, which African women still insist upon in their everyday lives. And so I see us moving away from it. You know, uh, to me, I find it disturbing that we know more about celebrity culture than we do our ancestors and our elders. We respect our celebrities more than we do our ancestors and our elders. Um, I love the elders that I have in my life. I love the wisdom that they provide. And so I think we have to give back to being who we already are, right? And I know that that kind of probably is not making sense to people, but when we really, really slow down and the spirituality aspect, we slow down, we meditate, we really focus on the inner being and let our quiet voice speak to us. We know that things are not right and we know we have to get back to our African mind. So in being mindful and respectful of the elders is something that we really need to get back to. um you know um as I move and I enter a new season of my life, I'm really understanding this more, and I'm really mindful of paying attention to my elders. um they really can give and impart wisdom, and really make you think about what it is we need to be doing. I have, like she says, a genuine love and respect for our elders. And we need to start teaching our children that, because now they don't have any respect. And there's a sentiment that, well, some elders don't reserve, some older people are elders and not elders. Yeah, but that's a slippery slope, because if you allow children to disrespect anyone based on something petty, because that's a subjective thing, right? Who's an elder and who's an elder? That's subjective. So everyone is worthy of respect until they show you otherwise. So yeah, we have to be careful because that's a slippery slope, and we don't need to be headed down that. Okay. So once we're respectful of our elders, another characteristic of the African woman is adaptability, right? We have to be adaptable. Um, This one, she explains, as the true African womanist demands no separate space for nourishing her individual needs and goals. While in the 20th century feminist movement, there is the white feminist insistence upon personal space. One of the leading mainstream feminists, Virginia Woolf, insists that women must have their separate space, a room for themselves. And so, as I said, the original text, the original edition, the first edition was written in 1993. And so, as we progress through time, we're obtaining bigger and better spaces for ourselves. So what she's saying is that we don't need to create this whole separate space outside of our home to find peace. We need to create peace in our home. And I understand that totally, because we have houses, but we don't know how to make them homes. Your home should be a place of peace. It should be a safe space for everyone, not just you, but for everyone, for your children, for your spouse if you have one. And we have to um, know that we don't have to go outside of that for peace. I'm all for self-care and all these things, but you should be able to have peace in your home. And if you don't, then are you adaptable? Are you making changes to create that safe space, to create that place of peace? African womanist, as an African womanist, I understand that my home is the first place of peace. If I don't have peace there, then I can't, how am I going to go outside of that space and find it somewhere else? And it's not just about me having the peace, it's about my entire family having peace. So we have to be adaptable, right? The African woman is ambitious, right? Ambitions and responsibility are highly important in the life of the African woman is or her family too, depends on these qualities in her. From early on, the African woman is taught the importance of self-reliance and resourcefulness, and hence she makes a way out of no way, creating ways to realize her goals and objectives in life. The sense of responsibility she has for her family is paramount, and so she creates a private space for herself in the midst of chaos, confusion, and congestion. Whatever the case, the African woman with ingenuity provides herself with whatever is necessary for her creative energies to soar. And so I do some of my best thinking um, in the morning, early in the morning when I first rise. I kind of, when I open my eyes, I kind of just lie there and think and meditate. And one thing that I love to do is walk in the morning. Um, and because it helps me clear my head, I don't listen to music. I listen to my thoughts and kind of try to organize them and figure out what it is that I need to be doing to be more productive. Ashe. When we first started with the acronym Ashe, it was, excuse me, after school education, and it has evolved into African stimulated education. But Ashe came to me early morning in my creative space, right? In being ambitious and being knowing that I needed to have some type of name for what it was we were doing with the children. Um, this was in Senatobia at the time, and so you had to carve out those spaces. Um, to do that. Ambitious. We are ambitious. African womanism is ambitious. We are resourceful. We always have made $1 out of 15 cents, right? We always have stretched meals. I mean, some of that soul food cooking comes from being resourceful and using what we have to make a way. So I really like that ambitious. Um, the last characteristic, and I spoke to this earlier, mothering and nurturing. She says, finally, the African womanist is committed to the art of mothering and nurturing her own children in particular and humankind in general. And so this is a major point because when you think about white feminists and you think about the history of white women and black women, enslaved women, you think about how we nurtured their children. And so that I can see that being a problem because they have, historically not nurtured their children. Even during the period right after Jim Crow era, and still, I remember growing up, and some of the elder women would take care, were still caring for the children of white women, and so we have been nurturers. We are nurturers. We are caring. We are loving. And I hate the direction that the dominant society is taking us into thinking that, we are not. And there are other things that are more important than motherhood and taking care of our children. I remember having a conversation with my oldest daughter, and we were talking about cooking. And she's like, well, I don't have to know how to cook. And I'm like, yeah, you do. You need to eat, and your daughter needs to eat. You have a daughter that has to eat. And so we don't even understand that just creating a meal, cooking is a form of nurturing our family. I love to cook. I grew up around women that were always in the kitchen, being creative, ambitious, using our ambition and resourcefulness to provide great meals. Economical meals for the family. And then I grew up in the country. So it was always some vegetable. something fresh, or if it wasn't fresh, it was something that we had canned during the summer. So just being uh, a person who loves to cook, and understanding that feeding our families is a form of nurturing, and it's a form of love. So she says, to be sure, the African womanist is committed to loving and caring for her own, which extends to the entire Africana family. And of course, the caring and nurturing her children entail making sure that an overall healthy environment is intact. And that is so true, because the African woman, she looks at all these children as her own. And one of the things that I love about Ashe Academy and our family here at the center is that all the mothers are called mama by the children and the scholars. I'm Mama Crystal. We have Mama Sade. We have Mama Ayo. We have Mama Sa. We have mamas, Mama Melly, and then we have our Babas. And so, you know, with that title comes responsibility, you know. And so I consider them my children, some of them my grandchildren, they are mine. And I'm a mama to not just mine. And I say it all the time because most of you all know I'm a librarian at a community college. And I have created some wonderful relationships with students. Some of them have gone on and done some great things, and some of them, well, I think all of them are great. I'm not going to say that. And I keep up with them because I am their mother. I posted some time ago that, I this position, I've been a mother, I've been a nurse, I've been all kinds I have all kinds of titles, not just librarian. And so when we get back, the African woman is understands that she is a nurturer, she is a mother to not just her children, but to all African children. And that is a beautiful thing, because just think about how much power and how much influence and how much guidance can be provided when we think about the children that we encounter as our children. That's a powerful concept, and we got to get back to that. Okay. So, an end to the gender divide must now come forth. This is Dr. Weens, and I agree 100%. Envisioning this could possibly be the answer to a conceivable resolution for all humankind via the belief in the ultimate salvation for all. And I agree with that. We have got to get over this gender divide. And she wrote this in 1993. And here we are almost 30 years later, and it's on steroids. And so one of the points that I always make is when we talk about the works of our elders and our ancestors and how their words are still relevant, is because we are not practicing, we are not putting into action the clear instruction that they have provided. And until we do that, we're going to do just like the children in the Bible that were, wandering in the wilderness. We're going to wander in the wilderness until we start taking heed to the clear instruction that our ancestors and our elders have given us. So let's do that. So that is the first part of the book. The second part of the book, she references 5 Africana womanist novels to describe some characteristics of what it is to be an Africanist womanist. And she references Their Eyes Were Watching God by our great Mama Zora Neale Hurston. And she speaks on Janie, the main character, seeking wholeness in that novel. The second novel is So Long a Letter by Mama Miriam Ba, and I hope I'm saying that correct. And the character Ramatole, she is seeking a family affair, the family connection, a characteristic of African womanism in this novel. And she's living in a polygamous society. And so this main character is seeking that. In the third novel, Praise Song for the Widow by Polly Marshall, the character is seeking authentic existence. And Beloved by Toni Morrison, the character is seeking all parts equal. And then she references in Disappearing as Terry McMillan that the African characteristic is that we're in it together. And so that is the second part, and she speaks in detail about each novel and the main character of those. The third part of the book is an addition to the book, and is added material for the fifth edition, and it is from Africana Womanism to Africana Melanated Womanism, and she speaks to other women that are part of the African diaspora, but aren't considered part of it, being included in the definition or in the concept of the ideology of African womanism. So yeah, so I don't know how I feel about that, because most times I think we include people who don't want to be included, and that kind of weakens us. But as I said, I just want to encourage you all, inspire you all to pick this book up and read through it and really internalize, especially Black women. We need to internalize what is being said in this book. Um, because she does get into the history, she gets into why um it is why she decided on African womanism, and here it is. I found it. She says the first part of the coinage, Africana, identifies the ethnicity of the women being considered, and this reference to her ethnicity, establishing her cultural identity, relates directly to her ancestry and land base, which is Africa. The second part of the term, womanism, recalls Sojourner Truth's powerful impromptu speech, Ain't I a Woman? One in which she battles with the dominant alienating forces in her life as a struggling African woman, questioning the accepted idea of womanhood. And then she goes on to say, only a female of human race can be a woman, but a female, feminism can be anything, right? And so that just kind of reminded me of this trans stuff, this fluid stuff, where you don't have to be a woman if you don't want to, you don't have to be a man. So we have to be careful. And I really love that she was forward thinking enough to think about that and really define and put a definite coin and self-defining term in African womanism to that. Um, so she goes on to say that white women's movement for two reasons. Oh, I'm sorry. There's a general consensus in the Africana community that the feminist movement, by and large, is the white woman's movement for two reasons. First, the Africana woman does not see the man as her primary enemy, as does the white feminist, who is carrying out an age old battle with her white male counterpart, but subjugating her as his property. And so, as I said, this book was written in 1993. So, uh, we're beginning to see Black women propagating that Black men are our enemy, and I don't know how that came about. Why it came about. I have seen Black women say, well, Black men does this to Black women. Well, we have to understand the society that we live in, and everything is a byproduct, right, of the society that we live in. And so we cannot be instrumental in continuing to tear our men down. Okay. So I see it is now 7:30. I didn't realize I was going to be talking so long, but I probably will continue this discussion. I know Sister Mila and I will be doing some broadcast on African womenism, and speaking to aging gracefully. And I think that is a part of African womanism, is aging gracefully and being a role model to our younger generation. So I'm going to end here, but I do want to make a couple of points, because I was watching an interview. Brother RJ Tayamba was interviewing Mama Ya Baruti, and I have been a part of her sister circles for some time, and she helped me understand that as African woman, this is about womanhood, sisterhood, motherhood, right? And so I asked her to speak on that a little bit, and I kid you not, she spoke on this book. She said we need to check out uh African Womanism by Dr. Weems. And then she also referenced To Be African, that was edited by uh, our great Marimba Ani. She and Baba Rudy have a couple essays in this book, but there is an essay by Mama Ani, To Be an African Woman. And at the end, she has to be an African woman is to be life affirming, to be in partnership with an African man, to be a political organizer, to function as a part of a collective, to exert influence, to speak for the ancestors, to be an advocate for Africa, to be a mother who does whatever is necessary to protect her child, to teach, be a healer, represent the continuity of African people, represent the stability of African people, maintain and pass on African culture, organize and direct the African market, enabling our people to understand the spirit of economic exchange and distribution of our resources, be a scientist of the sacred, be a spiritual leader, be an intellectual, be divine. And so they coincide. They all work, it all works together, right? So yeah, so I recommend to be an African as well, African Womanism, and they were her property. These are three books that go lock and step, right? And so that is it for this month's discussion. Next month, I am super excited because I will be having a guest, and we're going to be talking about her book, The Benefits of Eating White Folks by Mississippi native Leslie Taylor Grover. And I'm excited because she's going to be doing some work with us this summer for our summer camp at Ashe Academy. So tune in June 27th and catch me and Sister Leslie speaking and talking about her book, The Benefits of Eating White Folks. So I haven't started it yet. I'm excited about starting it. It's not very big. And because she's such a creative, there are different writing styles in here. I saw some poetry, I saw some prose, I see some illustrations. So I'm really excited. You can get this book at Amazon. Um, Purchase it and please plan to join us on June 27th as we discuss this book. Also, I restarted our sisters reading group, the Sister Soul Sisters Reading Ring. And if you want to be a part of it, just let me know. This month, we're going to be discussing this novel, Memphis, by Tara Stringfellow. So we'll be meeting this coming Monday. I think that's June 6th. Let me check my calendar just to be sure. Yes, June 6th at 6 o'clock. We're gonna be discussing Memphis. I haven't started. I plan on starting this week because I know from what I've heard it's really good. So I'll probably just breeze through it. So I'm excited about this. And then we already have our July pick for the reading group. We're gonna be reading Carolina Built by hold on, the title is covered up by the barcode. The author is Kiana Alexander, Carolina Built. So, I tell people all the time as a cataloger for the library, I get to put my hands on all new material that the library purchases. And so this book came through and I thought, oh, that looks really interesting. I want to read it. So we're going to be discussing Carolina Built as well. So I have these three books, The Benefits of Eating White Folks, Memphis, and Carolina Built. And so I'll probably be reading some other things as well. But those are the three that I have for the month of June, and I'm excited about that. Brother T says her property was discussed on Breaking Brown. I need to watch that because I mean it's some heavy stuff in that book. And we don't often place white women as slaveholders, right? uh we just think about men, but that book breaks down the ownership and the steps that these women took to ensure the ownership stayed with them. So and we all know that there was a law, I can't even remember the law, that granted immunity to white women who were murderers. And because most of the time they harmed black children, especially children that their husbands had fathered. And so, that whole history, it has to be told so that we can understand where we are now and plan for the future. So I want to thank everyone for tuning in. I finally figured out what was going on with Facebook. I didn't have my video set to public. So now it is. And so now I can see that people are viewing on Facebook as well. But I hope that you enjoyed the book discussion, the book review. I hope that you will be inspired and encouraged to pick it up. And I hope that when I have Dr. Weens come on, that you all will be able to tune in and be part of a robust discussion. So enjoy your day. Tomorrow is the 31st. Remember to pay respect and homage to the victims of the Tulsa massacre tomorrow. Ashe. Y'all have a good evening.